Hello again and welcome back to our course on PowerPoint 2013. Given the amount of trouble you've gone to make a really impressive PowerPoint presentation, it's absolutely essential that when you present it, or it is presented, it has the maximum effect. And one of the key requirements for any presentation to be effective is that the preparation for that presentation has to be good. Now, there are various ways of presenting a PowerPoint presentation, and in this section I'm going to quickly review what the main ones are, and then I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the preparation that you would need to make to maximize the chance of your presentation being effective. Let's start at the low-tech end of the technology spectrum. Let's suppose that you're going to be making a presentation in a location with no electricity, no computers, and your preparation will largely consist of preparing paper material. So you're perhaps going to give the audience a copy of your slides and carry with you a copy of your notes pages. Your notes pages can have all of your notes written on them, as in this draft of the Parliament presentation. So you've got all the notes you need. If you take something like this slide, which is actually smart art, where we applied an animation so that the boxes come in one at a time, bear in mind in that situation that you won't have animation, you won't have any sort of dynamic content at all on the presentation, but you might still use exactly the same notes to talk through each of the points in the diagram. Now, it may well be that the focus here is on having some nicely printed slides. You may also choose to give out handout pages where the slides don't occupy too much space, because very often in this kind of low-tech situation, one good aspect of presentation is leaving some space on each of the pieces of paper so that the audience can perhaps write some notes or do a little bit of exercise work, teamwork, as they work their way through your presentation with you. But something that's generally very important, and the first thing that I'd like to highlight for any type of presentation, including one which is actually done from paper, is that it's absolutely essential that you spell check and or grammar check the content of your presentation, because few things devalue a presentation more due to the omission of a very small amount of work on your part than a presentation that's got spelling and grammar errors in it. So, rule one, always make sure that your spelling and grammar check is done, the content of your slides is well thought out, there are no obvious errors, there are no missing slides, for example. And then even in this situation where you're going through a paper copy of a presentation, you won't be embarrassed by a very obvious glaring error. And when it comes to preparing paper documents, there's a very good option in PowerPoint 2013 that we haven't looked at so far. If I go into Backstage View and click on Export, one of the options there is Create Handouts. And Create Handouts gives you handouts in Microsoft Word. This means that you can edit and format the content in Word, and you can also automatically update those handouts when your presentation changes. That's a very good option to look at, because you can produce a much more nicely formatted document, and you can also put additional material into the document to help in a presentation. And if your presentation relies a lot on the audience either reading or using printed material, it's worth taking a look at that option. Now, although the option of working through a presentation on paper still happens from time to time, and in some situations it's still the preferred approach, some of the other non-computer ways of giving a PowerPoint presentation have all but died out now, really, although occasionally and in some situations they are used. These include, for example, producing 35mm slides and giving a presentation using 35mm slides, and the use of overhead projector transparencies generated from a PowerPoint presentation as well. These really don't happen very often, and to a large extent the rules to follow are the same as the ones for paper in terms of preparation, spell checking, etc. So I'm going to set those to one side and concentrate for the rest of this section on the presentation methods that are basically computer based. Now, for the methods that are computer based, there are a number of options, and I want to look first at the option of producing a video. because it's now very straightforward using either PowerPoint itself or various other third-party products to produce a video of a PowerPoint presentation. If you go to Backstage View and click on Export, one of the options is Create a Video. And this gives you the option to save your presentation as a video that you can burn to a disk, upload to the web, or email. Now this is a very different option to the ones that we're going to look at next, because in this particular option you're not really supplying people with a copy of your PowerPoint file in any format. You're just giving them a video, so they can't look at the individual slides, they can't dig into the presentation in some way, they can just see what appears on the screen. You can include your own narration, and there are many settings in terms of quality and so on. You can also dictate the timing on the slide, so when you create the video you can actually say how long is spent on each slide. And of course, because it's actually a video of the presentation, animations and so on can all be included in this presentation. The video can then of course be played in all the usual ways. So for example, the video could be uploaded to a website and people with the appropriate browser and video playing software could play that video on their own PCs, but that wouldn't give them any access to your PowerPoint file at all. You'd really just be letting them play a video of the presentation as it would be given by you. Now for most of the other ways of delivering a presentation, then in some way the PowerPoint presentation itself is going to be used or available. And so let's take a look at some of the other steps in the preparation for delivering a presentation and preparing the materials to go with that presentation. So let's suppose that I'm going to deliver example 12 as a presentation, and I'm going to deliver it using a PC and a separate monitor. Let's go through some of the preparation steps. I've already mentioned the importance of running spelling and grammar check, but particularly if the PowerPoint file itself is going to be copied somewhere or given to somebody else and maybe not protected in a particular way, then I may also want to take another couple of precautions. If I go into Backstage View and on the Info tab, one of the options, the middle option there, is Inspect Presentation. Now this option is particularly useful. It really comes in three flavors. Two of them: check accessibility, which is for checking the presentation for content that people with disabilities might find difficult to read, and check compatibility, which is to do with compatibility with earlier versions of PowerPoint. But in the context of getting ready for a presentation, it's the first option there, Inspect Document, that is very useful. Now if you click on Inspect Document, the Document Inspector dialog lets you choose what you want to inspect it for. And there are just really two things I'd like to draw your attention to here. One of them is that one, Document Properties and Personal Information. If you have that box checked when you run this inspection, it will look to see if there is personal information in the document. This will include straightforward things like the name of the author. Now if you get into the routine of running this inspection, it will remind you at least that you need to take your name out of the presentation if you don't want it there. And it will look for other kinds of personal information as well. The other very important part of this inspection is right at the bottom, and that is presentation notes. Now generally speaking, the notes are going to be of use when you are giving the presentation itself. And if you leave the notes there may be a good reason for that. You may be going to use them yourself. But if you're going to distribute this presentation, you may well want to remove those notes, because you won't necessarily want somebody else to sort of read your jokes or perhaps read some comments that might be taken the wrong way. There may be all sorts of dangerous things in your presentation notes. So both of these at least remind you of those things. And if you get into the habit of running the inspection after you've run the spelling and grammar check, you will probably find from time to time that they act as at least a very good reminder. When you click on Inspect, it runs the inspection, it doesn't take long, and if it finds either personal information or potentially personal information or presentation notes, then it will flag both of those for you, and you can check them out or make sure that they're removed as necessary. So that's the second very important point to remember. Make sure that you run the document inspector if the presentation is going to be copied or if the presentation is going to go out of your absolute control. So having checked the spelling and the grammar and for confidential or sensitive information, the next thing to do is to look at the presentation and say, on this occasion, am I going to present the whole presentation? Am I going to show all of the slides to my audience? There are situations where you may want to eliminate one or two slides. Supposing you've made a presentation for your boss at work and included in that is some financial information or some planning information or information that somebody else might find a little bit sensitive, shall we say, then you can hide individual slides very simply. If you use the thumbnails on the left, choose a slide, say that one with the table on it, right click, and one of the options is hide slide. And if you look at the numbering to the left of the thumbnails, that particular slide, the numbering has changed to red and it's got a little diagonal line through it. Now of course that slide is not deleted from the presentation, it's just currently hidden. So if I went through this presentation in reading view or I actually presented it as a slideshow, people wouldn't see that slide and I could unhide it at any later stage. If you right click on it again, you have hide slide is selected, click it again and it becomes deselected and the slide is back in the normal flow of the presentation again. Now one of the tabs that we're going to be using a lot in this section and the next one is the slideshow tab. And if I click on the slideshow tab, there is a hide slide button there. Depress it and the selected slide is hidden. Depress it again and it's unhidden. And in fact that slideshow tab is one also where we have another way of achieving the effect of only showing some of the slides in our presentation. There is a group there, Start Slideshow, includes Custom Slideshow, so click on Custom Slideshow. You get an option that says Custom Shows and you can create a custom show or use an existing custom show. So let's suppose I'm going to have 3 or 4 versions of this presentation. I'm going to have one for the general public and maybe one for schools. Perhaps I'm going to take this presentation around and explain the UK political system to schools. So I click on New and I get a Define Custom Show dialog. Now let me give my custom show a name. So let's say I say school, and that will remind me that this show is the one that I take to schools, and I decide which slides I'm going to put in there. So let's say I'm going to have that one and that one and that one, and well, I'm going to miss those two and I'm going to have that one and that one. So I then click on Add and I've got the slides in my custom show. And I can change the order using these commands on the right here. I can delete one of the slides if I decide I don't actually want that. When I've made up my custom show, it's available for me then to use when I go to do a presentation. So when I set myself up to run my slideshow, I'm at a school and I say, I want the school show for this. So that's creating a custom slideshow. And you can use this custom shows dialog to produce pretty much as many custom shows as you want. Let's suppose you had a school show and you had versions of that for senior schools and junior schools. You could even make a copy of that, so click on copy of school. You could then go in, set that up with a different selection of slides, rename it and so on. So that's a great way of taking a body of slides and information that you've got in a PowerPoint presentation and reworking it for different situations and different audiences. And that brings us to the next example. What I would like you to do is to either take your equivalent of example 12, or if you haven't got one, example 12 itself, and create a custom show. Call that custom show what you like. Mine is going to be called School, and mine is also saved as example 13. I would like you to have at least 6 slides in that custom show. And just a passing thought while you're working on example 13, you do remember about hyperlinks, don't you? And you do understand about navigation and buttons that move around and taking some slides out of a slideshow. It's just something to be a little bit careful of. That's it in this section. In the next one we're going to have a quick look at the final stages of preparing to give a presentation, so please join me for that.